you're giving 4 hours notice, I mean, I think we got more notice for the janta curfew and the plate banging event than migrant workers, and there are literally tens of millions of migrant workers to go back home. I think it's just been terrible oversight. If you see actions taken by Indian government, we were much more sensitive to international migration and travel. I think we should have given some time to migrant workers to go back home. There's clearly been a shortfall in expert advice on the lockdown speech and on the lockdown planning. It's fairly common sense that if you announce a lockdown and assure only supplies are there, but no assurances on wages, no assurances on other stuff, on accommodation, a huge part of India's circular migrant workforce is going to get very frightened and try and get home. And if there are no transport options, they're going to walk. And that's exactly what we've seen.
एक ही गाड़ी नहीं है, परेशान तो इस बात के व्यक्ति।
कहाँ जा रहे हो?
जौनपुर।
अच्छा, कितना किलोमीटर है भैया यहाँ से?
700 किलोमीटर।
कितना?
700।
I think the government realized its mistake, and after 4 days, on March 29, they've come out with a new circular, a new order, providing these assurances to migrant workers not to go home. But the fear is still there. And of course, the lockdown speech, I think that really could have been written out much better. There was really no assurance on jobs, on food, or for migrant workers in that speech. And so these are some of the things which could have been done much better. What it also means is that if India is ever faced in a situation like this in the future, there should be a clear manual guide now. That is, if you're bracing yourself for lockdown, keep migrant workers' concerns right up on the priority list and so on. So hopefully some lessons are being learned right now for future crises. One has to understand the psychology of the circular migrant worker. The person comes from the village or a small town to the big city because there's economic security in the city in terms of wages, but the social security, and there are two kinds of social security, the family and of course government provided social security, which comes in terms of the PDS system, ration cards. Now all of that is in the source. Any form of private or public social security is back home, but economic security in terms of jobs is in the city. Now when you announce a lockdown, when there's no work, a lot of these workers are daily wage workers. There's no assurances whether wages will be paid, how much are going to be deducted, etc. The economic security angle wipes, just gets vanished. So obviously each migrant is thinking about social security, and that's why the flight back. So that's a very simple psychology to sort of understand, and that's what's made literally millions of these migrant workers to move. It's just catastrophic because now even exports have been hit massively. Unemployment was anyway at a 45-year high before this particular event. So what we're going to see is just a massive spike in joblessness. Trade export sectors, centers like Tirupur, Surat, who depend on international trade, have been hit badly. And so this is probably the best time to roll out a massive social security kind of net, sort of like a New Deal of the Great Depression, which the Americans had done. I think outside of that, I really don't see any way in which the economy is going to get some sort of a safety net because otherwise you're just talking of human misery. You're going to talk about poverty levels spiking up. This has not really happened in a long time. You're going to see unemployment levels spike up. They just need to be spending much more in the coming months and probably the next 2 years. What should be done in the immediate few weeks? I'm going to talk from my vantage point as somebody who works on migrant workers. I think India has a great opportunity to finally leverage a universal social security scheme. This is called the One Nation, One Ration Card scheme, which is scheduled to come out by the Ministry of Consumer Affairs and so on in June. You don't have to go back home to access ration, etc. You can access your social security anywhere in India. It is on a per capita basis, so per person basis. So the migrant's family can access food back home, and the migrant can access subsidized food in the city. It should be released in June. In fact, now people are saying it might be postponed because of the current crisis. I think it should be brought forward. I think in April itself, we should start a massive rollout of this one nation, one ration card, because precisely we know for a fact that so many people are stuck in other parts of India. Now, de facto, of course, on the ground, these people are saying that irrespective of whether you have a ration card or not, you'll get access to so and so. I think this is a great time to roll out this policy in full measure so that whatever gaps one sees can be rectified in the coming months. This migrant crisis is not over. For those migrants who are still there, ensure that the orders which were announced on March 29th are fully implemented. It's very tough to implement. Two of them. One, that the wages for the month should not be deducted. I think that's a very, very important thing that has to be communicated to employees. And most importantly, the rental accommodation waiver, which has been announced by the government, which means landlords should be waiving off 1 month's rent for migrant workers. I think this would really, be some solid steps towards alleviating the plight of migrant workers. It's one thing to say direct cash transfer benefits and so on, but people don't want to walk to banks and, without transport, get the money and so on. They just want to have access to assured food supplies for the day, food and water supplies for the day. So I think that should be the task of the district level administrations for the next 2 weeks of this particular lockdown.
And should be given to workers irrespective of whether they hold their ration cards, right?
Absolutely. That's what the Delhi government has done. That's what Telangana is claiming, that irrespective of who you are, we will take care of you. And this is what should have been in the lockdown speech. That would have reduced the need for instant flight. For example, the RBI. The RBI made this speech that we will do what it takes. I think that's a very powerful message to financial markets, and that's what the government of India should have done as well for migrant workers.